Hello everyone and welcome to Fiction Friday. Today we have episode 23 of The Squire. I hope you enjoy it.
Rain tried in vain to feel the connection between her and the sword. The buzzing remained steady, but despite her best efforts, it never got stronger. She opened her eyes and found Michael looking at her with a little frown. He was already getting impatient with her, just like all her tutors back home. She blinked. He wasn't looking at her at all. His gaze went over her head. She swiveled around and found Queen Talia standing by the door. "Majesty, we've received another message from Cole. Would you like to listen?" "I would." Rain glanced back at Michael, who nodded. "We'll pick up here tomorrow." She got to her feet with as much dignity as a person getting up from the floor could, and followed Talia out of the meditation room. They walked for a while in silence before Rain asked, "Did you listen to it yet?" Talia nodded. "Don't worry. He hasn't gotten hurt. I will warn you now that there have been some alarming happenings in your kingdom." "Alarming?" "Better to wait and hear it straight from Cole." Rain frowned. Talia always wore a little smile when she mentioned Cole, and she seemed to think of him in a far too familiar way. Certainly too familiar for a foreign monarch speaking about another's agent. She never used his rank. Just a breathy "Cole," followed by the faint smile, like she remembered something pleasant. Too pleasant. Had something happened between them? No, Talia had a husband and Cole was a knight. He'd never... Would he? No, she was imagining things. They reached a door carved with runes Rain didn't recognize, and Talia pushed it open. A crystal ball twice the size of her head floated in the center of the room, above a small table covered with a velvet pillow. The king sat in a chair beside the crystal. He smiled, nodded, and gestured for Rain to sit in one of the other two chairs. When she'd taken her seat, Talia touched the ball with a glowing hand. Cole's face appeared, and he said, "I followed a group of Beastman slavers to a collection of pens that held several hundred people. I've never seen or heard of Beastmen behaving this way before, and I'm uncertain how best to proceed. I don't have enough men to attack the slave pens, and I have nowhere to take the people if I did. Please advise." Cole fell silent. Rain looked from king to queen. "What does it mean?" King Jared shook his head. "I don't know. We've never heard of this happening in the other kingdoms. We need more information." The way he said it made it sound like he was asking her for something, but she couldn't guess what. She raised an eyebrow and hoped he would be more clear. "We'd like Cole to investigate further," Talia said. "He's your servant, however, so we didn't want to say anything without your permission. Tell him what you want done, and I know he'll do his best to see it accomplished. What I don't understand is why the monsters would change their behavior suddenly. The only difference between this attack and all the others is your survival and their failure to break the sword. I don't know how the two are connected." Talia waved her hand, and Cole's image vanished from the crystal ball. "Perhaps if the sword were no longer in the kingdom, the beastmen would return to their usual behavior and retreat back to the mountains." Rain bristled. "I'm doing my best." The queen raised her hands. "I meant no criticism. I'm only trying to explain. I'll send Cole a reply." Cole found a cozy spot under a sprawling maple, its leaves just turning red, overlooking the slave pens, and sat down to watch. Talia said they wanted him to find out what the beastmen were doing with the slaves. He considered just heading up the trail and seeing where it led, but the last thing he wanted was a slave caravan coming up on his heels, so he figured he'd watch the pens, and when the next bunch of slaves left for wherever they were going, he would follow along and see what happened. Noon came and went, and nothing happened besides Cole almost falling asleep several times. He had a bite of lunch and spent the rest of the afternoon watching even more nothing happen. The next day brought more of the same, but finally, on the third day, mere moments after he reached his hiding place, the beastmen opened the pens and herded people out. One by one, they tied their hands together, then tied them to the person in front of them. The whole process took an hour and change. No surprise, since Cole figured there were 400+ people down there. They marched down the trail guarded by 15 beastmen. Not a huge number of guards for that many slaves, but considering the state of the humans, it was more than enough. Cole gave them a few minutes' head start, then followed, keeping his distance and staying off the trail. The line of prisoners trudged along until just before dark without a break. At last, the beastmen guided them off the trail and into a clearing that appeared to serve as a planned rest stop. While one of the wolfmen started a fire, the Saberfang in command picked out 3 humans that looked near death, untied them from the others, and reached for a knife. It took all Cole's self-control not to draw his sword and charge, odds be damned, to try to save those people. The Saberfang cut their throats. Cole watched, jaw muscles clenched so tight his head ached, until the monster began butchering the bodies. He couldn't watch that. Instead, he moved a few hundred yards deeper into the forest and lay down. He tried to get a few hours' sleep. Tomorrow promised to be another long march. If he had his way, tomorrow night would be longer yet. The beastmen had their prisoners up and moving at first light. They set the same plodding pace as the day before. It was probably all the humans could manage in their condition. Cole had a new plan today. He jogged through the woods parallel to the trail. Instead of following, he wanted to get a look at the area around the next rest stop. He reached it a little after noon. That gave him 5+ hours to scout around. When the slaves at last staggered into the clearing, Cole knew the ground well enough that he could navigate it blindfolded. He found an old, partially overgrown trail that ran away from the mountains and back in the general direction of the castle. If he sent all these people to Ged, the beastmen would track them down in a day, and their defenses wouldn't withstand an assault. Even though they'd voted to join the war, Cole didn't think this would be a good way to start. No, he'd send them to Pike's Cove. The strong ones could help with the defenses, and the rest could travel by fishing boat to Celestia. He wasn't sure if Talia would thank him for sending her 400 extra mouths to feed, but the alternative was letting them die, and as far as Cole was concerned, that was no option at all. Of course, if he failed to take out the guards first, it didn't matter what he planned. He settled in for his nightly vigil, including witnessing the murders of 3 more people behind a screen of evergreen shrubs. He clenched his teeth and watched. Cole could offer those poor people nothing more than to be a witness to their last moments of life. He owed them that at least. He choked down some food, more out of necessity than desire. At last, several hours after dark, the monsters set 6 wolfmen to guard duty while the rest turned in to sleep. He waited for 4 hours until the guards woke their replacements, then another hour after that so the wolfmen would have a chance to get to sleep. He guessed it was about 2 in the morning when he slipped out of his hiding place and snuck toward the clearing. Cole left his sword behind for fear of it catching on the brush and making a noise that would give him away. He settled for the long knife he kept as a backup weapon. Silent as a stalking cat, Cole inched ever closer to the nearest wolfman. The monster stood facing toward the bound slaves, never guessing death approached from behind. Cole struck, driving his dagger into the wolfman's kidney, the pain so intense the monster couldn't even cry out. He ripped the blade free and dragged it across the wolfman's throat before it recovered from the initial attack. The body went limp, and Cole eased it to the ground. 1 down, 19 to go. The humans closest to him looked to be in better shape than some he'd seen. Maybe it would be worth a few minutes to get help. He left the dead wolfman and slipped in amongst the humans. Most ignored him or moaned when he got close. No doubt they feared he was a beast man come to fetch them for dinner. Cole moved along, keeping crouched so the guards wouldn't see him. He was about to head back the way he'd come when a hand grasped his pant leg. Cole bent closer and his eyes widened. "Jack?" The former stable boy blinked his eyes as though not quite trusting them. "Cole?" He gasped and coughed. His lungs didn't sound good at all. Cole groped around until he found his friend's bound hands and started slicing. He soon had Jack free. "Where's Joey?" "He's here somewhere. They separated us." "All right, follow me." Cole led Jack back to where he'd left the dead beast man. When they'd moved a safe distance away, Cole asked, "How did you survive the attack on Castle Feingold?" Jack's soft laugh turned into a cough. "Pure dumb luck. We were getting the horses ready for the final event when the attack came. Pa threw us up onto the nearest horses and made us ride away while he went to find Mom. I don't think either of them made it." Cole squeezed Jack's hand. I'm sorry. You up to getting a little payback? Jack grinned in the dark. Damn right. I'll take out the rest of the guards, then come back for you. Together we'll finish the sleeping monsters, okay? Whatever you say, Cole. I figured I'd die tied up roasting on a spit. Even if we fail, at least I can take a few of them with me. Cole patted down the wolfman and found a crude knife which he handed to Jack. I'll be back soon. Stay here and keep quiet. He left Jack crouched in the dark and stalked toward the next guard. One good thing about being surrounded by hundreds of filthy humans, their stink hid his scent as he hunted the guards. He took down the next 3 as easily as the first. None of them expected trouble, so they were paying little attention to their surroundings. Cole spotted the 5th guard where it stood beside a boulder. He came up behind it, hoping to keep his good luck going. He stabbed it in the back, but some instinct caused the brute to flinch at the last second and Cole missed its kidney. The wolfman squealed in pain. Cole stabbed twice more, piercing both lungs and silencing the monster. The squeal hadn't been loud, but in the dark it seemed like a shout. He moved away from the dead wolfman. Cole hadn't taken more than half a dozen steps when he heard the crunch of the final guard approaching. He paused when the last guard bent over its dead comrade. Cole lunged and drove his dagger into the side of the guard's head, killing it instantly. He let out a breath. That one had been too close. He hurried to fetch Jack so they could finish their business before his luck ran out. Killing the sleeping beastmen had been messy but quick. All the guards were dead and the sun was coming up, so Cole set about cutting the bindings on all the slaves. By the time he finished freeing them, his dagger would be dull as a butter knife. For his part, Jack shouted for Joey and worked his way through the mass of slaves. Cole finished severing the bindings of a woman who hugged him. "Light bless you, sir." Cole smiled and patted her back. He felt her ribs through the torn shirt she wore. These people needed to get somewhere safe and fast. "Cole!" He turned toward Joey's voice and a moment later spotted the elder brother running toward him, Jack a couple of steps behind. If Joey had enough energy after all this to run, he'd be okay. He held out his hand, but Joey ignored it and hugged him. Cole stepped back and grinned. "I'm glad you two are okay. I feared the worst after the attack." Joey grinned back, tears making streaks through the dirt on his face. "We figured you'd bought it too. How'd you survive?" "Go get a knife and help me cut these people loose. I'll tell you as we work." The 3 of them set to cutting and Cole told them about his travels. When he finished his story and everyone was free, Joey said, "You risked your life to get the bitch out in one piece?" Cole nodded. "She turned into a halfway decent person along the way. She even stabbed Callion to save me." Jack laughed. "I wish I'd have seen the look on his face when she did it. It would have warmed your heart. What about you two? When did you get caught?" Cole glanced around the clearing. The people were looking around for wives or children they'd gotten separated from. It was getting light, but he figured they could afford a few more minutes to catch up. "We got caught about a week ago," Joey said. "We hooked up with some soldiers a few days after the attack and fought alongside them. Killed a bunch of beastmen, did a lot of running. In the end, we attacked a group that was bigger than we thought. Me, Jack, and one other guy survived. They ate the other guy last night." Cole winced at Joey's matter-of-fact tone. "I'm sorry." Joey shrugged. "He was kind of a jerk. What are we going to do now?" "You all will make a run for the coast. I'll follow this trail and see where the beastmen took the other people." "You aren't coming with us?" The panic in Jack's voice cut at Cole, but he had his own tasks. Joey put a hand on his brother's shoulder. "You got a plan, Cole? A few hundred people can't exactly sneak around." "You'll have to take a roundabout route." Cole found a patch of dirt and a stick. He drew a crude map of the area. Beastman activity has been minimal along the border with Kenton. You need to go north for 3 days, then turn east toward the lake. When you hit the coast, turn south. Another day should see you safe in Pike's Cove. Those of you who can fight are welcome to stay and defend it against the beastmen. Everyone else can get a ride with the fishermen to Celestia. "Sounds simple," Jack said. Cole grinned. "It won't be. Just keeping this many people moving will challenge you two. We need to strip every weapon we can off those beastmen and arm everyone strong enough to fight. Your best bet is to keep moving and keep quiet. If we're lucky, they won't know you've escaped until you're long gone." "Wait." Joey looked from his brother to Cole. "What do you mean we'll have trouble keeping them moving?" "I'm putting you two in charge of getting these people to safety. There's no one else here I'd trust with the job."
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Fiction Friday. If you liked what you heard, you can find more of my fiction on my website, jamesEwisher.com. Please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with anyone else you think might enjoy the show. Until next week, goodbye.